Hello, this is a narration of the Campaign of Tabuk by Abu Bakr Daud. I will also be going over the important lessons and wisdoms at the end. The story of the Campaign of Tabuk. A short while after the conquest of Mecca, growing rumors began to spread around the city in Medina that Hercules had advanced a year's salary to his army in a view of a lengthy campaign against Medina. However, the Prophet was also expecting his armies to open up Syria to Islam, and so he was too set about mustering by far the largest and best Muslim army he had ever led. This time there was no attempt at secrecy, with Muhammad ordering even the Meccans and the allied tribes to send at once to Medina all their available armed men and mounted men for the Syrian campaign. The season was always a hot one, but that year there was a drought, and the heat was more oppressive than usual. There were tests for believers, and many thought of the hypocrites approaching Muhammad with various excuses to stay behind. There, however, were three men of good faith, Kabin Malik and two others, who did not deliberately decide to remain home, nor did they proffer excuses, but it seemed to them undesirable to leave Medina with the rest of the army that they put off preparations until the last minute, when it dawned on them that it was too late. The armies arrived at Hajj, where the rock-helmed mountains of Thud stood, and the Prophet commanded the army to dismount for watering and a brief rest. Then, when the army reached the spring of Tabuk, they encamped for 20 days. It was evident that the rumors of danger from the Byzantine had been unfounded. Perhaps the news of a Muslim army approach had already reached the Byzantines, who had withdrawn to safety from their vicinity. The Prophet chose not to pursue the Byzantines, but instead invite all the tribes in allegiance to join the Muslims. Before the Muslim army was to return, the Prophet intended to put a stop to any future attack. And so, he sent Khalid ibn al-Walid and 500 cavalrymen to deal with Uqadin, the Christian king of Duma, who was suspected of preparing to launch an attack soon as the Byzantine forces could return. The rest of the army was commanded to return to Medina. Khalid hurried to Dumad and discovered the king was out on a hunting trip with his brother, thought to attack them decisively, and killed Hassan the king's brother while capturing Ukid. However, Khalid was unable to penetrate the city, but by threatening to kill Uid, the city yielded. After seizing 2,000 camels, 800 goats, 400 loads of grain, and 400 coats of arms, Khalid brought them, together with his captive, King Ukid, to Medina. In Medina, Ukid was offered Islam, where he converted. Upon his submission to God, he was installed as the king of his people and the ally of the Prophet. Upon the army's return, those who failed to enlist came forth to offer excuses. Many a hypocrite presented his excuse. The Prophet listened and let them go free without pending God's judgment. However, there were three believers who truthfully stated their reasons: Kabin Malak, Murrah, and Hilal. The Muslims were ordered to boycott them for 50 days, after which they were forgiven by divine decree and reintegrated within the community to the joy of Muslims. The lessons and wisdoms. After the recent conquest of Mecca, the Prophet was certain that God would open up Syria to his armies, and whether because he thought the time had come, or whether because he wished to give his troops some training for the inevitable Norse campaign, he was now announced an expedition against the Byzantines, and set mustering by far the largest and equipped army. The Quran details the Battle of Tabuk in more detail than any other conflict in the Prophet's life. The battle was quite unique to any other. The season was always a hot one, The year was always a drought, the heat was more oppressive than usual. It was also the time when there was much ripe fruit to be eaten, so there were two reasons for not wanting to take part in the expedition. The third reason was a formidable repudiation of the imperial army. The Kuwait narrative concerned the battle for the following themes. God spoke of difficult nature of the battle, and served hardships entailing the times of distress. God reproached the hypocrites for mocking those who gave seemingly little in charity. In the eyes of God, what is great is not the amount, but rather the sincerity and giving accordance to what one means. Part of the revelation spoke of 7 weavers, 5 needy helpers, 2 Bedouins, who the prophet turned reluctantly away because he was not able to provide military equipment to them, and so they parted with tears filling their eyes. There was no fighting that took place. The Roman participation of the Arab had now changed drastically. They were previously looked at an insignificant and unworthy challenge. Conversely, the Arab had always feared the Romans as a mighty superpower. But all that changed with the Battle of Tabuk, when the Romans were forced to flee the Muslim army. The Arabs began to realize it would be the Muslims that would soon defeat them. As a result, many of the Christian tribes around Tabuk broke off their alliances with the Roman and forced treaties with the Muslims. The heart-rending story of Kabin in Malik was narrated by none other than himself in a lengthy, wholly eloquent narrative. It was great of wisdoms and lessons. Of these wisdoms and lessons, 3 of them were. The greatest lesson Khazib learnt was mentioned at the end of his narration. By God, after he guided me to Islam, he never bestowed me on blessing an immense guide to a truthful messenger, for by not lying I was saved by being destroyed. He learned the only path to safety in his life and the next was honesty, regardless of the possible dire consequences. For this reason it makes telling a tale educating for his children. In accepting the excuses of the hypocrites, although they were nothing but lies, the Prophet taught us not only to judge what is variable to us on the outside. As for what is in the heart, Allah is the only one to judge. The ruler of this life are based on what happens to us. As for the reward or the punishment in the hereafter, it is the result of what lies in the heart. The powerful effect on the public orchestrated a boycott in reforming individuals. The Prophet would employ every allowable means to help cultivate and reform his society, even if this meant temporary severing ties with his kinship. It should be duly noted that the scale of the boycott of this nature can only be employed with communities with similar groundings in Islam as that of the Muslims community in Medina and at the time of the Prophet. Kabut reactions receiving the letter from the Christian king Ghassen bears testimony to his faith and loyalty to the Prophet. In this story, we have learnt the ways that Muslims can also offer thanking to God upon receiving a favor for him, to give money to charity, to perform prostration of thankness, rewarding the bearers of tidings, as Kahub gave a set of his clothing. This story has taught Muslims how to become better Muslims and how to deal in times of hardship. It has also showed the bravery of Muslims that have come together and banded to fight a common enemy. The story also tells us of honesty and how that is very, very important in a Muslim's life. This has been Abu Bakr Daud, and this has been my narration of the story of Tabuk. Thank you.